Good evening. A report commissioned by the Perth City Council has recommended the realignment of the Freeway route planned 20 years ago through East Perth. The consultants say the realignment would leave East Perth as a residential suburb, avoid environmental damage to the river and save $100 million. Councillor Ritter released the report today against the wishes of the acting town clerk. He explained why to Estelle Blackburn.
I'm an East Ward councillor, and the new idea means $100 million worth of benefit to the city and particularly to the East Ward, because the whole environment of the East Ward won't be wrecked by the freeway cutting it on top of the twice that it's already cut by the railway lines. So as an East Ward councillor, together with the other two East Ward councillor, Councillor Lay and Councillor Evans, we all three feel that this is an immensely worthwhile idea to have a good look at and take action on as quickly as possible.
Why did you push for the council to commission such a report?
Well, the idea has been about, but the government has suppressed the idea becoming public. They refused the Perth City Council the request to look at it further and told the Perth City Council to do that job themselves. So the Perth City Council commissioned this report that has now come out, and I believe that was a wonderful thing to do, to allow people, and particularly East Ward people and others, to discuss this idea and others. Ideas have been very, very sparse on the ground on planning for some decade or two.
You're saying the government has suppressed this information before. Will they then try to suppress this report?
Well, on form, one would think so. But if one can, in fact, as is right in a democracy, discuss ideas, as I'm now doing with you, then one hopes there'll be no chance of them suppressing this. You may remember that I resigned from the MRPA because of the misuse of the secrecy clause. Now, this is just such an instance where I believe the secrecy clause is misused, because I believe ideas that people pay for through the MRPA, they should at least be able to discuss or hear about.
A federal Labour MP says Australia again has imported thousands of flags from Japan to celebrate Australia Day. The member for Hindmarsh, Mr John Scott, said today the federal government did not seem content just to sell Australia to overseas interests, but was adding insult to injury by importing 40,000 Australian flags from Japan. Mr Scott said the National Australia Day Committee had confirmed that the flags, costing nearly $10,000, had come from Japan. The same thing had happened last year, only this time the imprint "Made in Japan" had been left off. There's speculation in the Irish Republic on the future of the country's opposition leader, Mr Haughey, whose Fianna Fáil party has been rocked by a telephone bugging scandal. Mr Haughey, the former Prime Minister, has already seen two of his senior frontbench colleagues, including the party's justice spokesman, resign over the scandal.
Charles Haughey was as composed as usual as he left home this morning for one of the critical meetings of his career, minus the services of his two closest colleagues who had resigned for their part in the bugging affair. But his party is divided, angry and confused. Last night, Fianna Fáil sources were suggesting the British embassy had been bugged by a previous rival coalition government, but the hint was hastily withdrawn this morning. Fianna Fáil deputies went into the special meeting this afternoon to discuss contradictory, murky allegations that bribes had been offered by someone to oust Mr Haughey or by someone else to keep him in office. But the bugging crisis is growing. The Irish police's security system looks pretty vulnerable, and the British will be wondering if they can be trusted with really important information on terrorists. But the Irish MPs are this evening concentrating on the feud which has exposed two party factions split apart by distrust, bordering on paranoia. Bugging affair has exposed a party at civil war with itself. Mr Haughey may not be ousted as party leader in the near future, but all the MPs have no doubt about what's really at stake. The whole survival of Fianna Fáil as a credible opposition and as the largest single party in the state.
The decision to keep imprisoned a Bulgarian accused of being involved in the plot to kill the Pope has increased tension between Italy and Bulgaria. A recent attempt to have the man released on bail was rejected by an Italian judge. This report from the NBC.
It was Judge Martella's decision, but it has not yet been made public. Italian newspapers and state radios say Martella decided to reject the appeal of Antonov's lawyers and hold the Bulgarian suspect in prison. pending his trial on charges of active complicity in the papal assassination plot. Antonov was arrested on November 25th, confirming the Bulgarian connection and triggering a sharp deterioration in Italy's relations with Bulgaria, a loyal Soviet ally. Ambassadors have been recalled and trade cut back. Antonov's lawyers filed an appeal based on what they described as an airtight alibi, citing witnesses who claimed Antonov was at the airport at the time the Pope was shot. But the alibis have not impressed the Italian prosecutors, in part because they are based on the testimony of Bulgarian citizens whose stories conform to their government's position of outrage and innocence. Antonov's lawyers and supporters have been claiming all along that if Antonov is held and not released, that would be for political reasons, to implicate the Soviet Union in international terrorism or to hurt the chances for an East-West accommodation. Judge Martella insists with apparent confidence that his actions and decisions are based solely on the evidence. Marvin Kalb, NBC News, Rome.
A report from Manila says Catholic bishops in the Philippines have decided to end dialogue with the military. Bishop Federico Escale said the bishops felt that since martial law had been lifted, civilian administrators should be allowed to resolve the Philippines' problems. He said the dialogue with the military was an exercise in frustration, with nothing being done. A rally has been organised in New Delhi against the traditional custom of dowries. The system is illegal in India, but is still a widespread custom and has been generally accepted for centuries. In the present economic depression, the demands for higher dowries have increased and led to an outbreak of bride burning in the north of the country. Many of the victims have been young girls who have become aware that their family cannot provide them with the agreed dowry and have practiced self-immolation or have been murdered by in-laws angered by their failure to pay. The demonstration was organised to draw attention to the illegal system and opposition to the custom which has been growing throughout the country. It's claimed by the ALP that the federal government is trying to maintain its anti-apartheid stand on the cheap by banning sporting links while promoting trade. The deputy opposition leader, Mr. Bowen, said the government's decision last week to ban West Indian players now touring South Africa from entering Australia displayed a double standard. He said the most effective way to put pressure on the apartheid regime was with economic sanctions. The families of British sailors who lost their lives when the light cruiser Glamorgan was hit by a missile during the Falklands conflict have received posthumous awards. A special ceremony was held on board the ship.
13 of Glamorgan's crew were killed last June when an Exocet missile hit the deck and destroyed both the ship's galley and the helicopter hangar. For those taking part, today's ceremony in the captain's cabin was a mixture of grief over the tragedy which had befallen the men's families, some of them with very young children, but pride in the husbands, sons, brothers and fathers who'd paid the ultimate sacrifice. The captain of Glamorgan, Chris Byrne, paid his own tribute to the men who were lost.
They did their duty. Be proud of them. And let these medals be a constant reminder of that pride, and let your grief be tempered accordingly.
But for John Stroud, 15 months old and kitted out today with a specially made sailor suit, it was absolutely clear that his father's medal was simply something to be played with.
Goldfields Police today mounted a major land and air search for a Perth man believed lost in pastoral country west of Menzies. The team of 3 police and an Aboriginal tracker are searching for Hugh Allen MacDonald, aged 57, who's believed to be lost in bushland on Riverina Station. Kalgoorlie Police said Mr MacDonald's vehicle was found abandoned earlier today about 120 kilometres west of Menzies and 20 kilometres from the Riverina Station homestead. The search was called off at nightfall and will resume in the morning. And finally tonight, a look at the weather. In the North Kimberley, isolated late thunderstorms. In the East Gascoyne, the Goldfields, the Western Eucla and Southwest Interior, scattered thunderstorms. In eastern parts of the Southwest Land Division, scattered thunderstorms overnight, and near the south coast, scattered drizzle. Fine elsewhere. In Perth, fine with southerly winds and an early fresh sea breeze. The fire danger is very high and burning off is prohibited. The estimated minimum temperature is 18 degrees and our expected maximum tomorrow 26 degrees. And that's all from the television newsroom tonight. We'll be back again at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Good night.